I'm going to keep moving forward. We're going to switch gears a little bit. Let me introduce our next speaker. So, our next presenter, Mark Milstein. Mark has been in press photography for more than 20 years. From 1991 to 2000, he covered more than 20 conflicts and major natural disasters for the Atlantic News Service. His work has included travel to cover news in the former Yugoslavia, Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Chechnya, Rwanda, Afghanistan, the West Bank, Gaza, Iraq, Kuwait, and the Congo, among other hotspots. His photo of two lovers shot dead as they tried to escape Sarajevo in May 1993 won critical acclaim and was known around the world as Romeo and Juliet in Sarajevo. It was the subject of numerous news stories, TV, and film documentaries. In 2001, Mark founded CEE's first internet-based photo agency in Budapest, Red Dot. In 2003, he founded North Photo, Central and Southeastern Europe's leading source for editorial photography. In 2008, he founded Microstock Solutions, the leading provider of outsourced image reviewing, editing, and keywording for the visual media industry. And with that, please help me welcome Mark Milstein.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Gee, after the last 20 minutes of some incredible photojournalism, I'm really humbled, one, and I hope that whatever I'm going to show you here even does some justice to you spending this evening here. I had all kinds of prepared remarks, and then I thought to myself, gosh, after listening to that, which I just kind of sort of toss these away and go and speak off the cuff. While Sam has rightly described me as being a photojournalist and managing a number of photo agencies, I have found myself in the last couple of years sort of falling in love with something that I eschewed for many, many years, which is celebrity photography. Being a war photographer for the better part of a decade, doing some serious photojournalism both in the United States as well as here. I looked upon celebrity photography as being the lightweight stuff, the kind of things that only sissy photographers did, and that the reality was that any self-respecting photojournalist would never, ever put their camera in the direction of a movie star and/or a faux reality star and/or anybody that might find themselves in the pages of, let's say, People magazine or Us magazine. But I don't know, something kept on calling me back, and I think it had to do with a fellow photojournalist of mine from the Washington Post by the name of Lucien Perkins, who at one point in his incredibly acclaimed career decided to turn his lens to fashion photography and celebrity photography. And here was this guy that had spent numerous years doing the same thing I did, and had won numerous Pulitzer Prizes and Pictures of the Year for his work in the former Yugoslavia as well as in Chechnya. And here he was doing what I call lightweight stuff, following Paris Fashion Week, going after celebrities in Washington. And I thought, well, if this guy could do it, I could certainly try it myself. And lo and behold, there I was with a camera in my hand a number of years ago in front of some small local movie stars in New York who were attending a movie premiere, and I did it. And I sort of thought to myself, gosh, this is actually kind of addicting. And after moving here to Budapest, found that Budapest, or saw that Budapest was becoming a magnet for movie producers and movie directors. As many of you might know, the last couple of years have seen a huge influx of foreign film production here. In fact, so much so that we're one to get in a car and drive on the M0 and go around the northern part of Budapest. You would be awfully surprised at what you would find from the Duna bank, the banks of the Danube, all the way over to where the M7 and the M1 meet up. You would pass by at least 3 major film studios. And we're not talking about small affairs, we're talking about large campus-like film production facilities that rival anything you would see in Hollywood. Some of them have 8 and 10 sound stages, the size of the average. If you think about the if any of you know the Tesco that's out on the M1, this huge, I think it's 20,000 square meter or whatever, how many square meter facility, if you imagine, let's say, 7 or 8 buildings like that, these huge airport hangar or aircraft hangar-like facilities that are now sitting there waiting for large-scale film production, the likes of James Cameron or Steven Spielberg or even Angelina Jolie to show up and start making a movie. And, well, like they used to say, if you build it, they will come. And lo and behold, they have come. This button does work, doesn't it?
Go right. There you go.
I knew it was a trick. As I said, I had some sort of prepared remarks, and I said to myself, gosh, how can I start this off? And I thought, no better subject than one of my favorite subjects, and that's Angelina Jolie's butt. I couldn't think of a better and more important subject to talk about this evening. I know all of you probably fantasize about her daily. We're closet celebrity lovers, and I think all of us are. All of us have sort of wondered what it would be like to put your hand on Angelina Jolie's butt. Well, I'm here to tell you that a lot of people do it. And not only do a lot of people do it, but they do so in public. And so here it was last year, and the year before that, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt descended with their entourage of 6 children, 4 nannies, 2 trainers, 2 chefs, 4 security guards, and 8 drivers into their palatial estate up in the Buddha Hills, and sat here for approximately 4 months during 2010 and early 2011, and then returned here for a further 3 months just recently, when Brad was making a film. And with them come the world's paparazzi. And so, like everybody else, here I was, for months on end, following these 2 around, day after day after day. If you've ever wanted to know anything about this woman, ask me after this event. I will tell you everything. I know more about her than her own mother does. And I can tell you that following her around is like watching amoeba below a microscope. They are incredibly fascinating. So much so that, as you can see here, Brad Pitt, the loving boyfriend slash husband of Angelina Jolie, has his hand all over her rear end. And he did so for days on end. Anytime you ever saw him, they were always canoodling and all over each other. They are madly in love. And so if you were ever wondering if it was a fake marriage, or if these 2 were really sort of just playing it up for the cameras, I'm here to tell you that no, they are all over each other like rabbits. The fact that they have 6 children is surprising because you would expect them to have by now 8 or 10. Here they were on this film set in the 9th district over off of Uloy Loop. They went to a Lakotalpa, a housing estate, just on the way out to the airport, that Angelina and her film crew had decided to set up a scene to resemble a neighborhood in Sarajevo. And having spent years covering the conflict in the former Yugoslavia and lived in Sarajevo for almost 3 years, I was surprised at how accurate it felt. I really did. Even when I came on the set, I said to myself, gosh, this really was a weird situation for me. I really did feel as if I was back in Sarajevo in the winter of 1992, early 1993. The buildings look accurate. All of the actors and actresses looked incredibly accurate. In fact, all the actors and actresses that they had there were former Yugoslavian nationals, actors and actresses. And so here was Brad and Angelina in a private moment, literally all over each other, and this guy looked up into this garden apartment that was behind them, and there I was with a 300mm lens, which is a very large lens with a doubler on it, with a colleague of mine standing perhaps no further away than, let's say, you guys are, and staring at them, and Pitt immediately put his hand like that on her rear end to say that, well, here we are, and they went at it. Pitt was, which you should well know, makes for some great photography. In fact, this event of them coming to Budapest wasn't just on the surface that she was making a movie here. There were actually some seminal events in celebrity photography. It was the first time that anybody had ever actually seen them kiss. In fact, although they had been together for 7 years, never once, despite, as you heard me say, that they are covered literally day and night by photographers, no matter where they go, had anybody ever photographed them, ever even coming close to kissing or even hugging each other. For years, for 7 years, although they had been together, they stayed literally at arm's length from each other. Falling into this world of celebrity photography, you quickly realize that in order to sort of keep up on things, despite the fact that you would imagine that everything that could have been done, every kind of picture that could have been made, had been made. The fact is that there were many, many pictures of them that people want to see. Look, inquiring minds want to know, that had never been seen. So here we were with history in celebrity history being made in front of us. Pitt and Jolie on the set of their movie, her movie, in the Land of Blood and Honey, which was filmed on Oil Loop. That camera, by the way, on the far right, on the right over there, is Brad Pitt's Hasselblad. Brad Pitt, many of you might not know this, is an avid and a very serious photographer, and carried with him probably about $60,000 or $70,000 worth of camera equipment. And he had very, very expensive Leica cameras, one-of-a-kind Leica cameras, as well as off-the-shelf Leica cameras and Hasselblad digital with digital backs on them, which were not children's toys. And for all the photographers that were here watching them, that was a source of fascination. And there were days where we would, only talk shop with him about the camera equipment. He's a man of very few words. But one thing that will get him going is talking about photography. He is, as I said, an avid photographer, and really takes himself very, very seriously. Not only does Brad Pitt want to put his hands on Angelina Jolie's butt, but other men do to it as well. And about 4 or 5 weeks later, they were filming the scene up off of Margaret Carreau on the Buddha side, and all the photographers were focused on the action on the film set. And at one point, Angelina was walking back to her trailer, and she has a team of bodyguards which surround her literally day and night. They're former SAS, British SAS, Special Forces commandos. Both of them, the two heads of the companies, had started a film and movie set security company. And they were hired by Angelina Jolie to protect her. Very, very nice guys, very professional. But sometimes, like in the film The Bodyguard with Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner, things can get a little bit uncomfortable. And I waited for these moments. If you're a good photojournalist and you're sort of keeping your eyes open and you pay attention to what's really going on, and you spend enough time on it, something magical will happen. And lo and behold, Jolie walks off the set, and what happens but the bodyguard puts his hand right where it shouldn't be, and held onto her rear end for a good 1 or 2 minutes as he made his way up to the trailer over there, and boy, did that set off a storm. The next day, the publication of this photograph caused such a huge uproar that the next morning, the security staff approached me as well as a number of other photographers and wanted to know who made that photo. And the end of the story was that it sort of snowballed into this thing where Brad Pitt ended up taking a phone call from Courtney Cox. I know how bizarre this might sound to you, but indeed, this is the inner workings of the Hollywood set, which then ended up causing a huge fight between the two of them, which all of us attempted to get on film, attempted to photograph, because of course having a picture of them now after being all over each other, now fighting, would have incredible value. He ended up flying back to New York for a few days after this. He was so upset. He took two boys with him and left to go to New York, and didn't come back for, I think, 5, 6 days. And when he came back, they made up. They ended up going to a Kallan Park, a park for kids, in a place called Orshikhet, which is in the 9th district. Many of you might know it. It's where Semmelweis University has their medical college. And they showed up there in the evening, just at dusk. And they had all their kids with them, except for one who had thrown a temper tantrum. And they had left the child with one of the nannies. And they all walked off into this park to start playing. And what amazed me was, we all stood, there was like 4 or 5 photographers standing outside the fence there, shooting them in very, very low light conditions. If you can all imagine, it was almost like this, as you can see here in the room. The light conditions were like this. Yeah, with very, very sensitive cameras and very steady hand, it looked like daytime. And they were watching us out of the corner of their eyes and attempting to act normal with their kids. They were playing, running around, and at one point, just like that, like on cue, without even saying a word, they each grabbed a child, turned around, and like bookends, stood there like this, waiting for the photos to be made. I mean, I thought to myself, gosh, it was almost like, you know how you look at animals, for example. I'm sorry that they're not animals, but you can imagine how sometimes wild animals can talk to each other without actually talking to each other. You know, they can sort of, you know, by intonation or signaling, or they give off pheromones. I don't know what it is, but these two seem to do the same thing. They very rarely ever talk to each other. When you do see them together, they're normally literally like lemmings all over each other. But they very rarely ever talk openly in public. But yet, as I just said, like that, they immediately turn onto the side like this, and like bookends, created this picture-perfect photograph, as if they had been practicing for years. You would imagine that they must go to their homes in the evening, and they must say to themselves, gee, how are we going to do this tomorrow? And quite literally, at the flip of a switch, this internal clock that goes off in their heads, they know exactly how to behave. Or, once again, they can't keep their hands off of each other. And they, as I said, do so without any verbal contact, or no verbal signaling between each other. They really know how to play the paparazzi or the press like a fiddle. And they seem to be the most professional out of all of the celebrities I think I've ever covered. They have the most incredibly well-oiled machine, despite the fact that they do not have a publicist. Neither one of them actually has a publicist. They do their own publicity. And you couldn't never imagine that. You would imagine that they would have this whole room full of people pumping out propaganda day and night, but the fact of the matter is that they do not. It's all coming out of their heads like that on the fly. Shifting gears, throughout the year, I fly back and forth quite a lot back to New York, and one of our clients, which is Us Weekly, which is owned by the Rolling Stone, Jan Wenner's publications, had asked me if I would spend some time hunting down Will Smith on the set of Men in Black 3. It's the newest incarnation of the Men in Black franchise. It's actually coming out quite soon. I'm guessing just before the beginning of the summer. You'll start seeing it in the theaters. And they had rented a very, very large armory, which is a place in the which is a place where territorial army or National Guard army vehicles and military equipment is kept in the United States. These large basketball arena-sized buildings. They rented this armory out in a Hasidic Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn. And it was really quite funny. I learned about this through a contact of mine, and had taken a taxi out to Brooklyn and came upon this set. And there were all these Hasidic Jews who had never heard of Will Smith, who was there filming this movie Men in Black, and yet here these guys were Men in Black, who were surrounding this film set. And I spent, I think, the better part of about 14 or 15 hours waiting for Smith to come out of his trailer. He had this huge, 2-story tall trailer home that he had outfitted with a gymnasium, a jacuzzi. It was a home on wheels, and the guy did not leave this home on wheels all day. It made me stand out there, literally collapsing after, as you heard me say, about 14 to 15 hours. And then finally, at the end of the day, just when I was ready to collapse and say, that's it, I'm out of here, he comes out of this trailer with a cup of coffee in his hand, singing. And he just came out on the little area over there and just started singing out loud. I don't remember exactly what he was singing because I was grabbing my camera frantically and attempting to focus my camera on this guy. And he stood there, I don't know, for the better part of 1 or 2 minutes, singing a song, using his cup as a microphone, then looking up and seeing that I was standing there, and acknowledging me. There were a group of 3 or 4 women there who had come together to seek his autograph. And Smith looked at them, and they rushed him. And without any security around, he was actually very, very friendly. I was quite surprised at how warm and touchy-feely he was with the crowd. I said to this one woman, gee, this woman who was standing next to me said to me that she was going to go over and give a big kiss to him. And I said, well, gee, I don't know, maybe his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, might find that a little bit hard to stomach. And she said that if Smith had any, what did this woman say? She said something to the effect that if Smith had any argument with her, that she was going to knock her teeth out. And she was going to do damn well what she pleased. And so just like that, she went over and gave him a kiss. Well, I sort of, switching gears, I'm sorry that I don't have it. It's not a thematic journey here. It's not as thematic as Akosh's beautiful reportage. I had come back to, going back to Budapest and coming back to Angelina Jolie. I spent an incredible amount of time focusing in on her daily habits. A lot of our clients were very much interested in what she ate every day, how she dressed, how she behaved with her kids. And one day, I was standing above her on a parapet of a small building, and I couldn't help but to notice that here was the world's most beautiful woman, according to many people, with severe hair problems. I was really shocked. She has, at the age of 37, a huge amount, now women, ladies I should say, you can all take this to heart, a huge amount of gray hair and thinning hair. And she has hair weaves in her hair. She has incredible hair problems. And in fact, you know, you would never imagine by looking at her in all these photographs, and certainly when she's made up for any of her movies, she looks the epitome of beauty. She is the, you know, the living incarnation of the Venus de Milo, or whatever version of beauty you might want to hold forth. People will tell you this, yet here she was in all of her humanity and all of her simpleness, wearing a pair of jogging pants, a simple Land's End t-shirt, a jacket that I think she bought from Burberry, and she had not washed her hair that day. And here she was on the set, no makeup, hadn't washed her hair, she hadn't had it dyed, and I was looking down and I thought, wow, this picture sold really, really well. Unfortunately, she was really upset about it, you can well imagine. But the nature of paparazzi, I guess, is to, you know, sort of expose the inner secrets of, you know, the people that most of us probably only wish we could ever, you know better. Truthfully, after the last couple of years of spending maybe too much time with people like Brad and Angelina, I can tell you that none of us, I dare say that none of us, would ever want to spend a single moment with them. They live the most boring and mundane lives. Much more boring and much more mundane than any of you, or any of us, I should say. Because we can go out anytime we want. They can't even leave their house without having people like me crawling all over them. A couple of weeks ago, Budapest was blessed by the arrival of Antonio Banderas. He came in, Banderas probably had no idea when his agent said to him, hey, Antonio, I got a great deal for you. There's this Italian company, they are a hotel chain or some sort of a travel-oriented company. I didn't quite get exactly what they did for business specifically. I knew that they had hotels and there was travel involved. Hey, you got to fly to Budapest and you're going to make this commercial and it's going to be on a green screen. In other words, you're going to be in a studio with green walls and we're going to animate animals. And you're going to talk to animals. You know, hey, you were Puss in Boots, you can handle this. You were a cat, you can certainly handle talking now to other animals. And Banderas must have said, that's an easy thing, no problem. And said goodbye to Melanie Griffith, hopped on an Air France flight from Los Angeles, flew to Paris, spent a couple of hours in the first class lounge at Charles de Gaulle Airport, then hopped on an Air France flight and arrived in Budapest, and said to himself, this will be a piece of cake. He walked out of the terminal and bam, the guy was completely inundated by young women who were there not to meet him, but to meet their boyfriends who were coming in on other flights. And they had realized that Antonio Banderas was there, and they said, to heck with their families, boyfriends, or husbands, and ran over and literally hopped all over him. I was stunned, and I think he was as well. And the guy didn't expect it, nor did anybody else who was covering it. There were about 7 or 8 photographers there. And he quickly made his way out to his simple Mercedes-Benz limousine, no entourage, nobody else with him. He had a backpack. He looked, as you can see here, in his simple jacket and shirt, not like Antonio Banderas, but just like anybody walking out of, you know, Federal Airport. And he gets in this car, and he sits down, and he has one of these moments where he goes, my wallet? And he does like one of these. And you know, all of you, or all of us I should say, have probably done this where you go, where's my mobile phone and where's my wallet? That's what he did. And I kept on shooting, and I realized that all of a sudden he was having this moment where his wallet was missing. And he starts going through his bag now, looking for his wallet in a frantic way. And the driver is not paying attention to this because the driver doesn't speak very much English, and Banderas is now screaming in a combination of English and Spanish about his wallet. But there's so much commotion and nobody's paying attention, and the driver closes the door, and Banderas is sitting in the back seat of the car, screaming through the windshield, "Where is my wallet?" or something along those lines. We couldn't actually figure out what he was saying, and then drove off. Nevertheless, the next day, this made the front pages of every celebrity rap sheet all over the world, as well as a number of magazines. And the story basically got spun that Banderas comes here to Budapest, and he's not 3 minutes in the terminal, and within those 3 minutes, somebody lifted his wallet, which wasn't a very good thing for him and or for the producers of this commercial, but turned out to be a boon for myself as well as anybody else who was there and picked up on the story. And that is, I had to realize at that very moment that as much as I sort of kept this in the back of my head, that, you know, paparazzi photography is never going to be anything like what Akos has done in the last year. You're never going to have any powerful moments where you're going to say, "Oh my God, I feel so sorry for Brad Pitt." Nobody feels sorry for Brad Pitt, believe me. You're never going to cry tears. You're never going to cry tears for the like of, for the likes of Bruce Willis, or wonder how he's going to get his next meal. But you certainly, have to imagine that these photographs, in a standalone sense, probably are not very, very powerful, but when strung together in a story, as I've just described to you, actually do have some prurient or, sort of under-the-table interest for many, many people. People really want to know what's going on. Their people's lives are quite simple, at least that's what they think. And, the minute somebody like this gets robbed, somebody like him gets robbed, everybody can now feel that, hey, heck, if Angelina Banderas can show up at the airport and be robbed, if it happens to me, well, I can feel all for the world better. Or not feel so bad. Yeah, oh dear, that's right. That is Rob Pattinson. Pattinson was also here in Budapest a year and a half ago, filming a movie called Belle Amie, which actually just came out a couple of weeks ago. It's now in limited release in the States as well as here in Europe. And he did a film the year before that called Water for Elephants with Reese Witherspoon. And photographers who worked for me were on the film set. They filmed in Idaho and in the high desert area of Northern California as well. And it was almost near impossible to do any filming on the set. They were in such an isolated area that coming close to the movie set was near impossible. They were using 1,200 millimeter lenses with doublers even. So basically it's the Hubble Space Telescope to make a photograph of two dots on a horizon. And they were prevented from doing so because of the high amount of security. And so there was a lot of what I call interest in the film because nobody had seen Witherspoon and Pattinson on the set, and there was a lot of scuttlebutt, a lot of rumors that there was some trouble, that the chemistry just wasn't right, that Pattinson wasn't exactly falling in love with Witherspoon as the producers had imagined, and that Witherspoon, thought Pattinson to be just a 19-year-old or 20-year-old kid without much between his ears. And so I was in New York the day of the world premiere and spent the day hunting them down and had very little luck. I spent most of the morning outside of Pattinson's hotel and couldn't do anything. And I got to the theater kind of early. I think the premiere was around 8 o'clock in the evening. And I walked up from my house at around 6:30, 7 o'clock. And I'm walking up 57th Street from 9th Avenue, and I'm walking towards Midtown. And lo and behold, I look down the street, and by the way, you should be aware that there are these thousands of young girls, 18-year-old girls, 17-year-old girls, who are in love with Rob Pattinson. These are, his Twilight fans, standing there waiting for hours upon hours for him, not knowing, of course, that he's been sitting in a hotel room, probably talking with Kristen Stewart all day on a telephone. And I'm walking down the street, going towards the Pen, where all of my fellow photographers are getting ready to shoot the red carpet arrival. And I look down, and behind me, here comes Rob Pattinson, walking down West 57th Street like a normal person. I couldn't believe it. I had to take a double take, and I squinted a little bit, and I said, "That's Rob Pattinson," and started running. Well, that set off a frenzy. The minute anybody saw me running, they imagined that something was happening. And the next thing you know it, I've got some police officer and a security guard and some woman who was the, I don't know, somebody from the theater who's organizing this event this evening, and probably about 200 young girls running after me as I'm now making my way towards Rob Pattinson. And as I'm running, trying to change lenses. Because I'm now going to go from a very large lens, I think I had a 200mm lens on my camera, down to a 17mm lens, because as far as I'm concerned, the only way I'm going to shoot this guy is as if I'm literally within breath of him. And I got down there, and contrary to his character, it was as if, as Akash was just describing, sometimes you're in a room or in a place where the subject that you're photographing doesn't care that you're there. Here we were, Pattinson was literally, I mean, inches away from me. And I spent the better part of about 10 or 15 minutes shooting the crap out of him while he was being surrounded and drowned by all of his fans. Much to the consternation of all of my competition, who were now across the street because they had marked out their places in front of this theater, who were prevented from going across the street and shooting this. And so the lesson here, I guess, was that you know, shooting celebrities is no different than shooting news events. We're not only to be ready. You know, news events can unfold very, very quickly. Just like a spot news event on the street, it could be a crash or some sort of a bit of turmoil. And so, you know, being prepared or having your eyes on literally on a swivel that go around the back of your head is really, really critical. Because then you come out with pictures like this. You know, these are very spontaneous moments because Pattinson is an incredibly private individual and very rarely ever schmoozes with his fans. In fact, the idea that you would ever see him walking down a street by himself without any entourage and just wading into a crowd of fans was just unheard of. And so pictures like this tend to sell very, very well. This is a picture of Stephanie March. I don't know if any of you are fans of Law and Order, the long-running CBS crime drama. So all of you know this show? Law and Order is a franchise of police procedural shows put together by a guy named Dick Wolf, who was a producer, and incredibly well received by critics, incredibly popular. They film all over New York City. And Stephanie March is an actress who's on this film, on this show. And I was down there ready actually to film Mariska Hargitay, who's a woman of Hungarian heritage, an actress of Hungarian heritage, who is the star of this show. And I had been photographing her all day on the set. And Stephanie March, who's not part of the show anymore, not part of this particular one of the show, showed up on the set. And again, as I said, you wait for these small moments, and while everybody was focusing on Mariska Hargitay, the star of the show, here was Stephanie March, who had just recently been married, sticking her hands all over this very well-built, what do I call it, assistant to somebody's assistant, a light tech. Wearing a very tight white t-shirt with great tattoos, looking very, very handsome. And I think she must have had her eyes on him, and there she was literally sticking her hands all over him and telling him how good looking he was and how nice it was to see him. And all I kept on thinking was, wow, these pictures are going to sell like crazy, because as soon as her husband sees these, there's going to be mayhem back at their house. And when he told a joke, well, gosh, she just melted. The exaggerated facial expressions were enough to send pictures like this right to the front page of any trash tabloid.
Can I just interrupt her?
Please.
So clearly with celebrity photography, the storyline is sometimes more important than the photo itself.
Yes.
Do you find, as a photographer, there is a drive to, I mean, forgive me if I'm being offensive, but to embellish the story in order to sell the photo?
Well, you know, yes and no. The answer is yes, and to some degree, and no, to not to some degree. And I'll tell you the no part first. The no part goes like this. These people are reckless with their lives. If there's anything I've learned after shooting many of these celebrities, is that they're incredibly reckless. And what I say by reckless is, or what I mean by reckless is, that they know full well that every single thing that they do, from picking their nose to farting on the street, is being recorded by somebody. It's impossible that anybody like this could walk out of their home and not be somehow recorded. So they know that. And yet despite that, they make believe that we're not there. They will become offensive with us, in the sense that they will prevent us from shooting. And it is a huge incentive for the photographer to pay very close attention to the events. And yes, to string together these events and to create a storyline in the sense that, well, look, this is not falsity. She did arrive on the set, yes. She did have interaction with this guy. She was flirtatious with him.
What if he was an old friend and he got a new tattoo, you know?
Well, don't let that get in the way of a good story. The fact is that she was recently married, and if any photographs could make her get a divorce and could destroy her marriage, well, let the games begin, because, hey, that's a better selling story, isn't it? And so, you know, if you went over to the Time Warner building, or over to Us Magazine, you know, if you went to People Magazine or Us Magazine or the National Enquirer down in Montana, Florida, there are rooms full of journalists willing to spin such a story based upon a photography.
So I'm curious, so the photo gets sold along with a story based on observation of the shoot itself?
Correct, that's right, for the most part. That's right, and or it is also highly probable that on such a shoot there will also be a journalist with me, and or with another photographer. There's a journalist there. But it is also incumbent upon the photographer to be aware of what's going on. I mean, look, to have shot something like this and to have not known this, let's put it this way. There were many other things going on simultaneously. I could have turned my camera to Mariska Hargitay. She had just adopted a child. That was a major story. She and her husband were, or she was childless. She had just adopted a child, and that, at that time, this is again 1 year ago, was what I call minor celebrity news. If you were so focused on this show, that would have been important to you. And you know, all of a sudden here, this other actress shows up, and if I didn't know any better, I would never have looked at her. But when I saw this and I saw the face, I thought, Christ, this woman is just too much. And then 2 seconds later, after this event was over with, she then nonchalantly walked over to Hargitay, who's there in the middle, and the other star of the show. And here she was, still with her hands on everybody. Now she's putting her hands all over the other actor. She's an incredibly flirtatious woman. Whether it was for the cameras or not, it worked, because lo and behold, I think this was on a Thursday or a Wednesday. On Monday morning, those pictures were in People Magazine. And if anything, that certainly does something for her career. I mean, if it's flatlining and she's not going anywhere, well then she certainly, you know, did the hey guys, look over here thing and got me to look.
Isn't there an argument to say that sometimes these things, they may even be orchestrated? So you say that oblivious to the fact that, you know, all these people there are watching the room, but I guess you sign up for it and think, actually, sometimes it could be quite hard to have a little bit of control. You know, Oscar Wilde, what we talked about, not be talked about, all that kind of stuff. So is there sometimes you think it's actually consciously trying not to look like it's set up type thing, so you guys then are hooked in
yeah, you know,
and feed it?
That's a really good question. And in fact, you know, the two most manipulative people that I've ever met in my life are Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. They can literally wrap you around their thumb. You know full well that no other celebrities, by the way, on the planet, and this is something that you should be aware of, demand so much money for their images as they do. Pictures of them doing anything could sell for tens of thousands of dollars. You know, a picture of, let's say, Angelina Jolie reprimanding her child, which I almost got. One of her children had a temper tantrum here in Budapest, and she literally did one of these things to her son. but there was a car and somebody else in the way, and I just got the top of her head and a hand. Would have been a multi-tens of thousands of dollar sale. So this is a serious business, you know. And so the likes of them, and they absolutely know how to turn it on or turn it off, just like that. They are absolutely, no doubt, as I said, I'll repeat again, the most manipulative, and certainly the most special, certainly the most acutely aware stars of their own self-value or worth to this for paparazzi photography. Richard Gere made a film this last year, in the latter part last year in Manhattan, called Arbitrage. It's a thinly veiled take on Michael Douglas's successful Wall Street franchise, and this film will be coming out this upcoming year as well. And Gere is a really, really funny guy. He is, on the surface, an incredibly religious man, somebody who's very much involved with the Dalai Lama and all things, you know, China. He's an avid collector of rock and roll guitars and memorabilia. He is a sex symbol. He is a somewhat successful actor. Here he was filming this movie in a large office building in Midtown, just off of 5th Avenue and 45th Street. And I had been standing out there by myself in the drizzle, waiting for him to come out of this building during one of his breaks to shoot him. And so here he comes, and as you can see, walking by me, and you would imagine that this guy has been photographed, what, 50 billion times? And yet, despite that, he decided to go off character. And the next thing I know it, and I'm looking at him, by the way, through my lens, through my viewfinder of my camera, the next thing I know it, I've got Richard Gere grabbing onto my arm. And I gotta tell you, talk about an Earth Eel out-of-body experience. Here he was grabbing onto my arm, and not in a very nice way, but in an incredibly forceful way. I'm here to tell you, by the way, that he must lift weights. He is an incredibly powerful grip. I expect him to be very effeminate and to just be able to just break away from him. But I'm here to tell you that no, should Richard Gere ever grab any of you, you are not breaking away from him. And so he grabbed my arm and said to me in the most bizarre way, he said, "Hey man, you're standing in my doorway." And I said, "Richard, there is no door behind me. We were just on the street." And he looked at me and said, "You're in my doorway." And then walked off. And I thought, this guy has a screw loose. He must have been very much in character. That is the kind of a thing that makes a great story, because of course, what happens the next day, when you report something like this in a caption, a photo caption, it's Richard Gere goes off character and decides to manhandle photographer, which is not an exaggeration. But indeed, you know, is part of the narrative of what I call this consistent narrative of celebrities behaving badly. 3 days later, this movie continues to be filmed, by the way, in Manhattan, and I'm out actually during the next 3 days filming Tom Hanks in a film called Incredibly Loud and Extremely Close, which was filmed on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It's a post September 11th film drama. And on the other side of Central Park, Arbitrage continued to be filmed. And during one of the breaks between Hanks doing a scene, I decided to walk across Central Park and to go over to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And there was Gere sitting there on a park bench just off of 5th Avenue. And I come over the top of this small hill. And you know, you would expect that these guys are literally focused on the movie. This guy must be being paid, I don't know, $8 or $10 million for this movie, and he's in character, and gosh, he's acting and interacting with a crew of perhaps 75 or 100 people. You know, how many people do you think they must meet in a day? And here I come over the hill, and as I'm walking over the hill, I look in front of me, and there's Gere, and he stands up, and he looks like this, and he has this look on his face where he realizes that it's me. And all I knew was, at this very moment, everybody on the set just froze. because Gere immediately went out of character. And I'm just standing there, like this, and Gere is now looking at me like, what, you again? And everybody else turned around at what, you know, who was this guy looking at? And stood there like this, I don't know, for the better part of a minute or two, literally staring me down, like this. And as I said to you, and as you intoned before, you know, where does the storyline begin? What are you creating as a photographer? And what is actually being created for you? And we talk about the manipulation of the press, or is the press manipulating or massaging the story? And so I put this out as part of an open-ended question that I ask myself, and I think everybody does. Are we the ones being manipulated here? Or is it us interjecting ourselves into the environment and actually creating the news? Was my presence now creating this situation? Or was he predisposed to doing this? And so one never knows, but they, you know, this is what drives this kind of photography day in and day out. If you ever kind of wondered, you know, what allowed that photograph that you might have seen in a magazine to be created, especially when it relates to celebrities like this, or what might, you know, cause things to happen, one never knows. As I said to you, one of the great stories, or one of the great questions that came out of the filming of Water for Elephants was whether or not there was any chemistry between Reese Witherspoon and Rob Pattinson. The answer is no. They hate each other's guts. I was so surprised at how unbelievably stiff they were. Although they kissed in the film, there was incredible, you know, romance or on-screen romance. Not only do they not like each other, but there were moments throughout the premiere, if one was paying attention, where he attempted to be friendly with her. He attempted to create something just there on the red carpet, but she rebuffed him at every single opportunity. I was really, really sensitive to this, and I thought, I'll now wait for her. Every time he attempts to do something, or attempts to smile at her, I will now wait for her to respond. And so I positioned myself purposefully to avoid shooting him, but to get her. And as planned, and as I expected, he attempted to be nice with her. He attempted to sort of say something cute, funny, whatever, and she would just look at him like, I'm not biting into that one bit. And so this is accurate depiction of their relationship. As farcical or as, you know, non-serious, or, you know, however you want to look at celebrity photography. But this is what goes on behind, or at least in the thinking process of, let's say, I would hope at a higher level of this kind of photography. You know, it's not, again, it's not war photography. It's certainly not, you know, a serious reportage. But if you go to any magazine store, and if you think about the volumes of photography that are purchased and ingested every day by the world's population, I'm here to tell you right now that all of us, at one point or another during the day, will view this kind of photography, whether we don't admit it or not. And the majority of photography which is reproduced in magazines or in e-zines or in any sort of a web portal relates to celebrity, relates to, you know, this kind of, yes, please.
I was going to say that guy behind her has got some serious
jaw action.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought he was the guy from Entourage. It's not. He's actually one of the producers, or part of the entourage of producers of the show. I think they were really, really concerned about how fast things were not moving along. There was a huge media presence that they had planned for, by the way, and that the interviews and all of the things were taking too long, and that there just wasn't enough. You know, they wanted cute moments, and it just wasn't happening. They tried, but this woman, Reese Witherspoon, who's about this tall, would not do it.
Maybe he was a two in a tight white t-shirt like your man earlier.
Well, that's another thing, that's right. And so, you see here this one moment, but I'm here to tell you that everything that you see her doing is absolutely 100% fabricated at that very moment. He, on the other hand, was being incredibly, what I call warm, and attempting to somehow create a relationship to anything. I mean, you can see that he was trying, but she just wasn't buying it. So if anybody ever tells you that Reese Witherspoon is a lovely, cuddly, you know, a bundle of joy, I'm here to tell you that, no, absolutely not. She is a cold actress. Budapest, as I said, has become this magnet for film production, and that doesn't just mean always high-end stuff. It also means low-end, and low-end in this particular case is 20th Century Fox, that's a movie company back in the States, and low-end also means Disney stars. Back in late 2010, a film called Monte Carlo was made here in Budapest, starring in the middle there Selena Gomez, who is a Disney starlet, who is that's correct. You got it. Who is the girlfriend of Justin Bieber, which, well, if you're a teenage girl, is probably not a bad thing. And to her right, or to the blonde-haired woman on the far left over there, I should say, is a woman by the name of Katie Cassidy, who is the daughter of a 1960s, I think, drug-addicted rocker. And the woman on the far right there is Leighton Meester, who is the much hyped star of a very well-known American teenage girls television show called Glamour Girls. And they were here making this movie, and days went by where dramatic lines were being spoken or nothing was going on, and then we wait for these moments where all of a sudden a little bit of magic, and this little interaction here was probably the most important thing that had happened there. But again, if you love teenage faux celebrities, and this is your cup of tea, you would live for these kind of photography. You would live for this kind of photography. I can only tell you that making this kind of pictures is incredibly complicated, incredibly time hungry. I spend quite literally 6 or 7 hours or more just to make one photo. The amount of time that it takes to even squeeze off a single frame, could be literally a full day's worth of work or 2 days worth of work. These kinds of pictures do not just come about one after another, let's say in a well-organized, let's say, news event, or if you're in a conflict zone, it takes much time. This was Pattinson here in Budapest filming this movie, and interestingly enough, these women who are standing behind him are just tourists. They were walking on the street and they squeezed in this doorway, and the story behind this is that they were standing there and they were allowed to stay there, interestingly enough, and I don't know how tightly the camera was photographing him, or filming him, but they were allowed to stay there, and one of the women there, and I don't exactly know who, found this photograph reprinted in a magazine someplace, and somehow through the internet was able to contact me and wrote me a letter asking me for copies of these pictures. She lives in Germany, she's some tourist. And I thought that was quite strange. It was the first time it ever happened. I think actually it's the only time it's ever happened, where anybody who's been caught in a picture that wasn't wasn't the focus of the photography, who then had contacted me in a really, what I call, unique way, and then had asked for copies of the photography. And, well, on that note, I will wrap this up. Thank you very, very much.